It's summertime, which means it is time for our summer reading list. I'm going to go first. First on my list is Veil by Jonathan Janz. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I picked this up just kind of on a whim at my local fantasy bookstore. Yes, we have one of those. It's located in Bethlehem, PA, and it is called Sorcery and Scripts. They just opened up a couple months ago. It's a game store. Fantasy. It's got some speculative fiction stuff in there too, but it's pretty nice. And they have like events and all that kind of stuff. And so when I went in there, I wanted to buy a book and support them. This book in particular, the setup is that people are vanishing from reality, dragged off by unseen monsters. A high school teacher investigates the disappearance after his family is abducted. And so that's as far as I have gotten because I have not actually read the book yet. I like it because I like monsters on my summer reading list. I usually go for lighter reading. It kind of scratches that creature feature itch that I have. So what's first on your list?
Well, first on my list, I guess, is kind of monsters as well. It's Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove. Don't remember how I heard of this, but the cover is very evocative. It's very colorful. The idea behind the book is spaceships aren't programmed to seek revenge, as it says. But for Dracula, Demeter will make an exception. The spaceship Demeter is shuttling passengers, but they keep dying. And Demeter realizes that it's because Dracula is on board the spaceship. Demeter, in order to prevent itself from being decommissioned, has to join forces with her own team of monsters, which is a werewolf, an engineer built from the dead, a pharaoh with otherworldly power, a vampire with a grudge, and a fleet of cheerful spider drones to defeat the ultimate evil of Dracula.
As one does.
It says it's the queer love child of pulp horror and classic sci-fi.
That does sound like a great setup. Next book is Children of Strife, which is the latest book in the Children of Time series. And these are really just fantastic books. Have you read any of these? I know I've talked about them on previous summer reading
I have
lists.
not yet, and I really should add book one to my list. But again, it's one of those that's like 3 months wait for the library. So I might just buy it, but yeah.
But what's the setup, Ken? And so this is by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Am I saying that correctly? Let's go ahead and say that I am.
Yeah,
Tchaikovsky. The ongoing tradition for Ken and his summer reading list is that I never pronounce the author's names correctly. So all apologies, but someone can spell it out for me in the comments. But in the Children of Time series is set up like Earth is a ruin. We send generational starships out into the galaxy to try and make new Earths. And as part of this, there was this sort of seed virus that the idea was that we would seed the planets with life, or with the life that was already there, we would take advantage of it, and this virus would uplift them. So if you think of David Brin's Uplift series, similar sort of concept. And in the first one, they were supposed to seed the planet with monkeys and then uplift the monkeys. But all the monkeys died. But there were spiders on the planet, so it uplifted the spiders instead.
I remember you telling me about this. Yeah.
Yes. So each of these books has introduced a new sort of uplifted species. So they had, let's see, it was spiders and ants. They had crows. The last one, I think, or the second to last one had octopuses. And now we are up to the spectacularly punchy mantis shrimp. So
the mantis shrimp?
The mantis shrimp.
Like actual mantis shrimp? Oh, geez.
Actual, evolved mantis shrimp are the intelligent species of this. And then they encounter a new geoengineered world that has actually been engineered by a different faction from Earth. So it's not following some of the rules that we've come to learn from the previous series of books. So it's all very, very good. I think if you're interested in sort of alternative intelligences. And I had a friend that I was talking about this because we had recently seen Disclosure Day. And Disclosure Day by Steven Spielberg is kind of a very sort of traditional sort of gray aliens. And, they've been kind of out there and intervening in human civilization and what have you. I like the alien stories where we just don't kind of go with this thing that's like us, just a little different. I like the truly alien, the one where you actually like Arrival, where you don't understand the species, but they want to talk to us and we want to talk to them. And you're just trying to figure out how to bridge that gap, as opposed to the Greys just coming around and messing with us. So this is very much in my particular wheelhouse. You also have some terraforming, not quite as run amok as
I said silly stuff, but this is a much more serious book. It's my third attempt at it. Is Red Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. I seem to make it through about the first chapter or so, and then I'll put the book down and I'll forget to pick it back up, which does not say a lot in terms of how I like the book. So I'm hoping chapter 2 is better. I think chapter 1 is more or less a prologue of how things get started. it's a very, at least the part that I've read, a very political sort of intrigue sort of thing. So it might fall into the Expanse sort of side of sci-fi. My dad loved the series, so I'm encouraged that it's a good series. Basically, you've got a group of scientists who have colonized Mars. They were specifically chosen to be very stable psychologically, but only somebody, as it says in the first chapter, only somebody really crazy effectively would be just fine leaving all of their family, their birth planet, etc., off to go live with a couple hundred people on Mars. While they're being chosen, they had to be very, very careful on how normal they seemed and how adjustable they seemed, all the while kind of, biting back, I guess, some of their craziness. And that first chapter kind of elicits, that there are some people there that really shouldn't have been there. I don't know if the rest of the book's going to be.
I read Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars. I think it's a classic science fiction series, well worth reading. And I love how it goes through the different phases of terraforming on Mars. He demands a lot of you, I think, as a reader. It's a tougher book to kind of get through. There's certainly a lot of like the political stuff going on. If you like For All Mankind, the series on Apple, I think there's some echoes of that. The series came after For All Mankind came well after Red Mars was published, but I can see some perhaps inspiration in For All Mankind, especially now that I'm in the season that has Mars. He also gets into some of the really cool big science of Mars, right? Or just big science, like the things like what would it look like to actually build a space elevator? How do you warm Mars? How do you get water to Mars? So it's all very cool, but it can be a bit of a slug in places.
Yeah, it sounds much more like a hard science fiction, not a space opera science fiction.
Yeah, it's real science. and a lot of it is geopolitical, or stellar political, solar political.
It's a political thriller wrapped in science fiction clothing.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, it's got, I don't want to go that far, because the science is important and the consequences of it's all interrelated, right? The space elevator and the politics around the space elevator become very important, but also, I don't want to spoil it. Let's just say all of the consequences of the big things they're doing play out as it moves through these eras and as Mars seeks to separate itself from Earth. So it's a very good read. I very much enjoyed it.
I'll have to pick it up again. Like I said, it's my third attempt, and I think I'll get through it this time because I know what to expect. You have one on your list that I read ages ago. You have a new version of it, though, which is an annotated version.
Yeah, so I have The King in Yellow, which is by Robert W. Chambers. It was released in the early 1900s originally, I think.
It is old enough to be in the public domain, so it's at least 80 years old.
So if you've ever heard of Carcosa, the city that is like I don't know, it's not actually the inspiration for all other cities. That's another book we're going to talk about. But it is an echo of many earthly cities, and many earthly cities echo Carcosa. It's very much foundational to the Cthulhu mythos. I think it's as foundational as a lot of stuff that Lovecraft wrote. It is in some ways as problematic as some of the stuff that H.P. Lovecraft wrote, because there is some like just straight up racist stuff in here, guys. You can't avoid it. But the thing that is very helpful about this book is that it's annotated by Kenneth Hite. And so he explains the context of both the time, of the author, and he doesn't forgive any of this, but he's providing you with additional sort of insights into what was happening at that time. And there's things that are in here that are, Chambers is basically talking about a future that never was in some places, but it's very much our past. He's talking about movements in the 1920s and 30s that had not happened yet, right? And so Kenneth Hite is going in and explaining the roots of that alternative history, which is a thing that I hadn't even known about. So it's actually a collection of short stories. It's not just The King in Yellow. But The King in Yellow is this mythical play that was produced and released in Paris, and then it spreads around the world. And whenever someone reads the play, terrible things happen, either in that city or to those people. And there's these little bits, and the mythos of
it. Yeah,
it's just a cool idea of like it's this self-replicating play that no one quite knows exactly where it came from, but it just keeps popping up in these different cultures. And there's some sort of ancestral things that show up in it and has this, dated back to the early times. And so it's cool because I'm also reading a Delta Green scenario based on The King in Yellow as well, which is
gotcha.
A very cool book. But I don't want to spend all this time talking about The King in Yellow. It's a cool collection of short stories. I think if you're going to read The King in Yellow, I would pick up this edition because Kenneth Haidt is an awesome guy, and he does an amazing job of using his encyclopedic knowledge of everything to explain the context of what Chambers wrote.
Yeah, and I think I might pick that one up as well, because I know that what I read was The King in Yellow, but it might have just been The King in Yellow short story, which is very surreal.
Yes,
to read it. It's almost it's written in kind of a poem kind of way, not straight prose if I'm recalling it. And I would like to, because it's annotated, I don't know that I would like to read it on a screen to be able to look at the annotations and everything. I want to be able to easily move back and forth in the book.
Yes, there are many footnotes or many annotations.
Yeah.
So definitely worth picking up if you want to explore a bit of geek history.
Yeah, I will check. You mentioned a bookshop near you. I'm going to mention one that's close to me, which is Valkyrie's Vault, which is actually a game shop, but they just opened 2 decent-sized bookshelves of books. Last few times I went in, it was showcasing the book series that you and I are both reading.
You're much further along than I am.
Yeah, it's Dungeon Crawler Carl. Matt Deniman will actually be at Gen Con this year. I don't know that I'll be able to see him, but they did have several sessions of pictures with Matt that the Princess Posse could come and take pictures with Matt. Since I'm further along, why don't you tell us about the setup for Dungeon Crawler Carl and Dungeon Crawler Carl Book 1, and I'll talk a little bit about Book 8.
Gotcha. Yeah, so this is part of the RPG Lit genre, which has many different kinds of books in it. I was kind of interested in sort of a follow-up to Ready Player One. Ready Player One is a very different book, but it kind of has the game within a game, and it certainly, I think, like Ready Player One, Dungeon Crawler Carl is pulling in tropes from games and pop culture and what have you, but I think he's a little bit more reflective about it. And so I don't know, I've kind of put this off for a while, but the setup is intriguing. So basically, and honestly, when I got into it, I did not quite realize how literal the setup was going to be, that it was a real dungeon. I thought he was doing sort of snatched from Earth and deposited in a dungeon. No. And this is not a spoiler because it happens, I think, in the first page. Aliens show up. They flatten every single building on Earth. And so everyone in them is dead.
Anything with an interior space, cars included.
And then all of these openings to a true literal dungeon within the Earth open up all over the planet. And so the survivors have this option to go into the dungeon and try to get to, I think it's the 18th level. And if they get to the 18th level, they earn their freedom and for the Earth or something.
Very vague.
Very vague. And meanwhile, the survivors on the planet, I don't think are going to survive that long. Because if you don't go in, you suddenly are living on a planet that has absolutely no infrastructure. And for those of us who've gotten used to things like air conditioning, modern healthcare, the internet, it might be a little bit harder to survive in a world in which all of that has been flattened.
Yes.
Carl goes into the dungeon. He is accompanied by his girlfriend's cat, and who is Princess Donut. And there are any number of other crawlers who make their way into the dungeon from all over, and Carl has various adventures. And to be clear, Donut is not his pet, because she quickly becomes enhanced and becomes like an actual crawler
uplifted
herself. Uplifted. It's almost like a theme on this particular podcast. But yes, she's like basically enhanced and becomes self-aware and sapient, and now is right there fighting alongside Carl. But it's interesting because Donut, I think he plays this well. Like, Donut is suddenly intelligent and is looking back on her prior life and like putting some things together, but she's also very kind of naive and excitable, and her character definitely grows over the book. So I am currently 3/4 of the way through book 3. And I think the thing that I'm enjoying about the series is, like I was talking with Ready Player One, I think this one, it's a goofy book.
It is.
It's a funny book.
It has a lot of social commentary, but it's
a gross
primarily
book.
Goofy. Yes.
There are things that Carl has to put up with which are terrible, and they're occasionally played for laugh. But at the same time, there are these lines that kind of run through it where Carl realizes how awful this is. Donut is coming to understand how awful it is. Certainly the other crawlers are aware of what's, like, for example, in the first book, very early on, Carl learns that there's I guess in the same town that he was in, there was a whole nursing home full of people who they had a fire drill, And so in the middle of the night, they had to go out because there was a fire. And so they weren't killed when all the buildings were flattened. But now you have people who are north of 100 years old that are entering the dungeon. And you've got their nurses who are trying to keep them alive in the dungeon, right? And then Carl will mention it because it's shown up in all 3 books where he's like, you will not break me. He wants to get through this. You don't see that sort of like as much of like the social commentary aspects of Ready Player One. Ready Player One was just having fun with geek culture and didn't get too introspective about all of it. This book, I think it's still, I mean, there are things that are funny, there are things that are gross. It's definitely playing off of like video games and RPGs and all of this stuff. And it's kind of self-aware in that regard. But he does kind of go into those like those moments where it's like, yeah, this is really screwed up. I realize this is really screwed up and it's actually happening. It's not actually a game. But then you also have all the game elements. So how are you enjoying it? Because you're much further along than I am.
I'm enjoying it a lot. And, you know, it is kind of a fine line that Matt Deniman has had to go along to keep it on the more entertaining rather than the dark and gloomy side. Because like every time, you know, book 1 is level 1 in the dungeon. And every time they go down a level in the dungeon, there's an announcement of how many people are left in the dungeon, which is almost how many people are left of humanity. There are people still outside. There are no children in the dungeon. That's one of their rules. The aliens' rules is there's no children in the dungeon. So there's like a big daycare center, I guess, on the surface of the planet that you find out later. But yeah, it's I'm on book 8, which is a Parade of Horribles, which is a Grand Prix race through the dungeon. The there's like, it's not a standard, it's like Wacky Races, the old cartoon Wacky Races. It's not a standard like Grand Prix car or Formula One car. It's like a taco truck and a bus and an ice cream truck and an 8-legged giant spider thing, but not a spider. And yeah, it's all sorts of weird stuff. And so, and you know, they have to figure out how to get through. And the thing with Carl is he's trying to save and keep as many of the other crawlers alive at the same time. One of the things that I think I like the most about the series is you've got these rules, you've got these problems that everybody has to, you know, navigate in order just to survive to get to the next level. And it's a question of, how is Carl going to subvert the rules, or how is Carl going to think outside the box to make sure he and Donut and everybody else that he cares about make it to the next level? And then you have other characters in there that are just hilarious. You know, we talked about Princess Donut, who eventually gets a Velociraptor pet. And every time Princess Donut gets upset at something, she will blame it on Mongo. She will say, Mongo is appalled. She won't say that she's appalled. Mongo is appalled. You know, and slowly but surely through each book, the AI that is running all of this, that the aliens set up to run autonomously, is going more and more insane. I am looking forward to book 9. Like I'm in book 8, but I'm already looking forward to book 9, which I believe comes out next year. I'm not going to stop. You know, it's a fun series.
It is.
I'll probably reread it because there are things that happen in each book, and then the later books call back to those things.
Yes.
And so a reread is not something that would be boring because you'll probably notice some things ahead of time.
Yes, he's pretty good about the payoff in mentioning things on the first and second levels. There's a lot of foreshadowing, but it's foreshadowing that actually comes to pass rather than say, I don't know, the Wheel of Time, which is 18 books and 20 billion plot threads, of which only a handful end up getting resolved before the end of the world.
Yeah, I never finished Wheel of Time. I was like, I think I was on like book 8 or something like that. I can only do so many well-turned calves and so many, if only Matt were here, if only Brand were here.
Pulls of your ponytail and hands on hips. I gave The Eye of the World to my nephew, and he is reading it. And I'm the only person he can talk to about it because I'm the only one who's read it. And so whenever we get together, he's like, oh my God. And then he's also doing that thing where he's like, why? Because he's on book 6 or 7. He's like, why won't anybody talk to one another?
Yes, 100% yes. Why won't they just talk?
Yeah, so hopefully my
Yeah.
nephew will still like me when he gets through
Yeah.
this
But
particular series.
I enjoyed the series for a while, mainly because I had other people that I was commuting back and friends that I was commuting back and forth to work with that I could talk with, and they could talk with me about the book and all of the different threads and everything else like that. And what do we think is gonna happen? And then when we left that job, we were no longer commuting together. And so a lot of the fun about the books kind of went away, unfortunately for me. But that's not on our summer reading list.
It's not.
We're on a side passage here, Foreshadowing. But it is an older book. And our last two books are older books.
They are.
And rereads. So Ken, you have another book that also kind of ties into some stuff coming out. So I think that's probably why you're reading it.
Yeah, I got another thing. I'm bringing the classics of sci-fi and fantasy to the next generation. I got my nephew to read Wheel of Time series, and I got my son to read Dune. When the new Dune movie came out, he got excited about it. He read, I think, the first 3 books. I don't think he made it through the 4th book, which I'm currently reading, which is God Emperor of Dune, otherwise known as When Things Get Super Duper Weird. The 3rd movie in the Dune series is coming out this December. I think it might actually be coming out on my birthday, but it's coming out in mid-December, and I'm super excited about that. This is not that. The 3rd movie is actually Dune Messiah, which is the 2nd in the series, and it's a nice conclusion. The first book tend to set up Paul as this hero figure, and Dune Messiah is like, well, what happens when the Messiah wins and the horrible things are unleashed upon the galaxy in his name? But the 3rd movie will be the consequences of movies 1 and 2. God Emperor is about what happens when the Messiah's son decides that his dad didn't go far enough and he needs to rule the entire galaxy and turn himself into a sandworm hybrid so he can live for thousands of years and save humanity from itself.
Oh, jeez.
There are a lot of Duncan Idahos, so many Duncan Idahos, and they die in a variety of horrible deaths.
Cloning is a thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you've seen the trailer, there are hints of Duncan shows up in Dune Messiah.
I mean, Duncan shows up in one of the trailers, and people might be like, I thought he died.
He did. You should get used to that.
A little bit of a spoiler. It wasn't that it was behind closed doors and Duncan, falls over and appears dead and then they help him out. No, Duncan is dead.
He is very, 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 very dead. But the thing about being dead is sometimes they come back. And Duncan comes back. And then he just keeps coming back. And so God Emperor, I read it in high school. It's been many, many years since I read it. I know it gets weird. Everyone's like, ooh, do you really want to do that? Like, yeah, I'm just gonna carry it through to the end. Because the thing about reading the Dune books as an adult is you get more out of them. And so Frank Herbert, even just like the first 3 books in the series, Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, reading it again, he was very much into environmental themes, politics around environmental themes, the implications and the impacts of terraforming Dune, because that's not played out so much in the movies, but in the books, transforming Arrakis into a habitable world that is like your standard sort of M-class planet from Star Trek, right? Or Earth-like. Well, that has huge implications for the galaxy, the spice, the sandworms, the culture of the Fremen, like all of this. And Herbert just goes hog wild for it, and he does a tremendous amount of world building. And in God Emperor, it might go off the rails a little bit, and by a little bit I mean a lot. And Duncan's going to die a whole bunch of times, if I remember correctly. But I know that it's going to be weird, and what I'm actually more interested in is getting into Heretics of Dune and Chapter House Dune, which are the last 2 books in the series, and they're the ones I remember the least, particularly Heretics. I really can only vaguely remember what happened in that particular book. I am excited to kind of get into it. I'm going to battle through. I'm going to read the next 2 books over the next 2 years on my summer reading list. And I don't know. I'll report back on just how weird it actually was.
My last book is actually 10 books. So this is Roger Zelazny's The Great Book of Amber, which is actually all 10 books of the Amber Chronicles. And I am doing a reread of it because Chris Miller, who's on our show, is running an Amber game using Savage Worlds, and I wanted to remind myself about Amber, I remember the first few books better than I remember the last set of books. And so, like, I need to reread stuff. I'm in book 2, which is Guns of Avalon, and almost done with it. I don't know. It's been an interesting reread. I see why young me really liked it, but I also realized that young me didn't appreciate the writing exactly. The writing in book 1 and book 2, it's not the same as some of the more modern stuff where people talk to each other. It's a lot of like description stuff and then little bits of dialogue here and there, and then a lot more description and action and things like that. And it gets the point across, but I know it probably won some awards back then from the science fiction crowd, but the writing style in here is, I think, in one of the reasons why a lot of like people who read literature and other stuff like that turn their nose up at science fiction. Like,
yeah, I don't know.
So I also wonder, how does his writing evolve over the 10 books? Because they weren't all written in a year. So
they were not. And the latter, the second series, the second 5 books, I like less than the first 5 books.
The first 5 books are Corwin. And then the second 5 books are Corwin's son, I believe.
Merwin. Yes.
Yeah, Merwin. So
Merwin? Yes, Merwin, not Merlin. But yes, Merwin. I don't know. I loved it. I liked, because there's a certain sparseness to his writing and how he described things that was very evocative. It also kind of has this, and some, especially his earlier books have this like sort of trippy 70s fantasy where there's sword fighting and there's like these various tropes, but it's its own thing. It's different from any other sort of like traditional sword and sorcery sort of book that you're going to read. It's not Lord of the Rings.
It's its own sort of mythology and such. The concepts in it are really good, but it's also like, it's not as easy of a read as like a Dresden Files or a Dungeon Crawler Carl or any of those it's sort of things. It's not hard to get through, but it's definitely a different feel. So
I think, I can get what you're saying. I think I don't know how our reading histories line up, but like I grew up blowing through like Asimov and Clark and like all of those. That was like my foundational stuff. So to me, I think their styles I think I got used to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is, like, when I read it as a kid, I was in high school when a friend of the family gave me the first 2 books, and I love them. I tore through them, and every single time a new one would come out, I grab it at the bookstore and buy it. So like, I truly do love the books, but it's one of those things when you revisit something that you enjoyed as a child, you notice things that you didn't notice as a kid because your tastes have evolved, and your ability to read and read critically is also different as well. And like, I had a similar issue with, like, I hadn't read, what was it, Larry Niven's Ringworld. We had talked about this before. I read for the first time Larry Niven's Ringworld, and I can see where it was good, but also it's kind of a product of its time, and there's some misogyny in there and other stuff in there that didn't age well, but the book was fun to read. It's funny. I enjoy science fiction. I really liked a lot of Heinlein stuff, even though Heinlein became problematic later. And Orson Scott Card also became problematic later with the Ender's Game stuff. But I also read a lot of fantasy. So I read more fantasy than I ever read science fiction.
Yeah, whereas I was the opposite. I think this was one of the first major fantasy books that I read. I read it in college, and I think I didn't leave it alone long enough. I've reread it probably every 5 years since college. So
Gotcha.
My version of that book is in pieces. If I'm going to read it again, I have to get a new version, because every time I pick it up, a couple of new pages fall out.
Yeah, I tried. I mean, it's a hefty chunker of a book. It's 1,258 pages. I tried to pick it up in ebook format, and you can't. They want to sell you the individual books now. They don't do the 10-volume version. So if you want to buy, at least on Amazon, if you want to buy all 10 books, it's $75. As opposed to, and obviously this was, I don't know, was this put out? I mean, we're going on a side passage again here. But this was published in 1999, December of 1999.
Oh, okay.
So this is 27 years ago, but it was $24 27 years ago, which was a hefty thing back then, $24, but I would imagine it would probably be like $50 today, but it would still be less than 75 of each individual purchase.
So I have them on audiobooks too, because I would listen to them on my commute. And so I might do that again now that I have a longer commute again. I might start listening to them because I too am inspired by Chris's campaign, and I do truly love these books. I don't remember who reads them. I remember there being a copy of the books where Zelazny himself reads the books, but I can't find a copy of that audio recording. So if anyone knows where it was abridged, but it was great because it was Zelazny like reading he was reading Corwin as like Corwin, basically, right?
Gotcha.
So it was very cool to listen to him bring
Corwin.
Like, I still have his voice is in my head even when I listen to the audiobook.
Corwin in some cases does feel a little bit like a self-insert character, that he's putting himself into the book a little bit. But I've read other stuff by Zelazny. Lord of Light is a trippy read, but a really good one, and I like him. I don't have any issues with any of his books. It's just going in and reading it now. The writing style is so different from the books that I'm reading today.
Yes.
It's definitely this feels like it was written in the 60s or 70s sort of feel. I don't even remember when was the first book.
I think it was in the late 60s, if I remember correctly. But
72.
There you go.
There you go.
Because he was still publishing them through. I think the last book of the new series came out in like the early 90s because my roommate in college turned me on to it.
Yeah. And 92 was Prince of Chaos, which is 91 was Prince of Chaos, and then mass market printing was end of 92. And unfortunately he passed in 95. So we don't have much else. There's some short stories out there that get added on.
Yeah, it's very formative for me, but I get what you're saying. I had the same reaction to Lord of Light because I didn't read it as a kid. When I read it as an adult, it was also, I think, one of his earlier books because I think that one did come out in the 60s, and I struggled a lot more with that.
And I read it just in the last 2-3 years.
Okay,
so like it was
maybe a similar reaction to that one. But in any case, we want to know what's on your summer reading list. Do you have one? What books are you reading? What are you hoping to get through this summer? Let us know by leaving a comment. And before you go, we want to know what you think about an age-old debate whether to use squares or hexes for your battle maps. Stop by our YouTube channel where you can vote on the new poll and leave your thoughts on which grid style you prefer.